Good morning. This is the second Sunday in August, and today I'm going to read a book to you, a very important book by Sandy Sasso, who was one of the first women rabbis in the Reformed Church. She lives in Indianapolis, but the illustrations by Phoebe Stone are particularly interesting. I hope you enjoy this book as much as I do. After God created the world, all living things on earth were given a name. The plants and the trees, the animals and the fish, and each person, young and old, had a special name. But no one knew the name for God. So each person searched for God's name. The farmer, whose skin was dark like the rich brown earth from which he grew things, called God source of life. The girl, whose skin was as golden as the sun that turned night into day, called God creator of light. The man who tended sheep in the valley called God shepherd. The soldier who fought too many wars called God maker of peace. The artist who carved figures from God's hard stone called God my rock. Sometimes the people who called God by different names were puzzled. They said, every living thing has a single name. The marigold, the pansy, the lily, the oak tree, sequoia, and pine. God must have a single name that is greater and more wonderful than all other names. Each person thought that his name or her name for God was the greatest and the very best. The farmer who called God source of life said, this is the true name for God. The girl who called God creator of light insisted, this is the most splendid name for God. The shepherd, the soldier, the artist, they each believed that they had the perfect name for God. But no one listened, least of all God. And so each person kept searching for God's name. All the people called God by different names. They tried to tell one another that their name was the best, the only name for God, and that all other names were wrong. But no one listened, least of all God. And so each person kept searching for God's name. The woman who cared for the sick called God healer. The slave who was released from bondage called God redeemer. The grandfather whose hair was white with years called God ancient one. The grandmother, who was bent with age and sorrow, called God Comforter. The young mother, who nursed her newborn son, called God Mother. The young man who held the hand of his baby daughter called God Father. The child who was lonely called God Friend. Then one day, the person who called God Ancient One, and the person who called God Friend, and the person who called God Mother, and the one who called God Father, all the people who called God by a different name came together. They knelt by a lake that was clear and quiet. It was clear and quiet like a mirror. God's mirror. Then each person who had a name for God looked at the others who had a different name. And then they looked into the mirror of the lake, God's mirror, and they saw their own faces and the faces of all the others. And they called out their names for God. Source of life, creator of light, shepherd, maker of peace, my rock, healer, redeemer, ancient one, comforter, mother, father, friend, all at the same time they called out their names for God. And at that moment, the people knew that all the names for God were good, and no name was better than another. And all at once, their voices came together, and they called God One. Everyone listened, most of all, God. I wonder which of these names for God you like the best today. I wonder if on other days you might like a different name for God best. I wonder if you could draw a picture or write a poem about your favorite name for God today. Or maybe even just write the name in big letters and color it in. I hope you think about the story this week and think about all the different ways and names that we have for God and ways that we see God. Next Sunday, we will be talking about a story of a man who had 2 sons. God bless you this week.